day to all my 8th standard students. Hope you are all doing good. In previous class, we have learnt about ancient civilizations of India, in which we have discussed about Harappan civilization. Just we'll have a small recap of Harappan civilization. In Harappan civilization, we learnt how the nomadics learned to become stable in one place, and the fast urbanization of Harappan cities, their town planning, their town life, and the decline of Harappan civilization. These were the things which we have discussed during last class. Now, let us discuss the Vedic age, which was next to Harappan civilization, the Vedic age. The period between 1500 to 700 BCE was called as Vedic age. Before entering the chapter, I would like you people to know about Aryans. Who were Aryans? The Aryans were the Indo-European tribe. These Indo-European tribe were living in southern Russia of Ural mountains. You can see here the Ural mountain slopes in which they were living. They have migrated from this place to Punjab via Afghanistan. They have migrated to Punjab via Afghanistan. And these Aryans were the one who compiled Vedas. According to D.K. Ghosh, a well-known historian, in his book called The History and the Culture of Indian People, which was published by Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, he stated that the culture built by Aryans are based on Vedas. So, it is called as Vedic culture. In his book, he has clearly mentioned that the Aryans were leading the life based on the Vedas. So, the culture which was followed by them was called as Vedic culture. The period between 1500 to 700 BCE is called Vedic period or Vedic age. Now let's see the 4 Vedas. The 4 Vedas are Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda. These are the 4 Vedas. And based on these 4 Vedas, the Vedic age was divided into 2. Depends on the compilation of these Vedas, Vedic age was divided into 2. Now let's see that. Rig Veda period was between 1500 to 1000 BCE. During this period, Rig Veda was compiled and composed. Hence, this period was called as Rig Veda period or early Vedic period. Later to that, 1000 to 700 BCE, the period was called as post-Rig Veda period, in which Sama Veda, Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda were composed. So, it is called as post-Rig Veda or later Vedic age. Now, do you all understood how the Vedic period was divided into 2? Rig Veda period was between 1500 to 1000 BCE, whereas post-Rig Veda period was between 1000 to 700 BCE, in which the other 3 Vedas were compiled and composed. Now we'll see about Vedas. What are Vedas? Vedas are mainly a compilation of nature worship, yaga, and process of yagas and black magic. These Aryans were living the life based on Vedas. They were following strictly the Vedas, and they were worshipping nature, and they were doing yogas. And these Vedas are the compilation of nature worship, yaga, process of yagas, and black magic. Vedas are called as or also called as Samhite. Vedas are also called as Samhite, and every Samhite has a text called Brahmana. Every Samhite has a text called Brahmana, which explains various ways of performing rituals. Which explains various ways of performing rituals. And every Brahmana has an Aranyaka and Upanishad. Every Brahmana has an Aranyaka and Upanishad. Aranyaka have necessary suprasensory instructions to hermits who were living in the forest. Those who were living, the hermits who were living in the forest, for them it gives suprasensory instructions. Whereas Upanishads are the reflective discourse on philosophy. India is well known for its philosophy and is famous for the philosophies. Upanishads are the evidence of intellectual maturity of Indian culture. Intellectual maturity of Indian culture is evident through Upanishads. Now, let's move on to Rig Veda period or early Vedic period. Rig Veda is the first among all the Vedas. Is considered to be the oldest one among all Vedas, and it is the first one. It has 1028 suktas or prayer songs. The suktas are nothing but prayer songs. It has 1028 suktas, and they are grouped under 10 mandalas. All these 1028 suktas were grouped under 10 mandalas. And the historians opinioned that there is a time gap between first sukta to the last 1028 suktas. The time period may be about 500 years. Now, all these 1028 suktas were not compiled at a single time. And historians opinioned that it would have taken 500 years to compile all the 1028 suktas. Now, let's move on to the geographical location of this Rig Vedic people. The Rig Vedic people, the early Vedic age people, were living from Hindu Kush to Doab of Ganges and Yamuna. What do you mean by Doab? The word Doab means, Do means two, Ab means rivers. It is an Urdu word. The land between or the area between two rivers are called as Doab. Rig Vedic people have settled from Hindu Kush to Doab of Ganges and Yamuna. And in the same way, in the northern boundary, from Kashmir to Sindh region, they have settled in these places. Now, let's move on to the social system. Now, we have discussed about the geographical location of Rig Vedic people. And now, let's go on to social system of Rig Vedic people. During the entry of Aryans to Punjab, that is to India, during the entry of their time, the Aryans, during their entry, there were three communities among them. During the entry of Aryans to Punjab, there were three communities among them. that is aristocracy. Secondly, priestly class, and third one was common people. During this time, there were no caste system, but there was an evidence in 10th mandala called Purusha Sukta. In that, there is an evidence about Adi Purusha. According to this 10th mandala Purusha Sukta, the gods have created Adi Purusha, and from the mouth of Adi Purusha, Brahmanas were born, and from shoulders of Adi Purusha, Kshatriyas were born, and Vaishyas have come from the thighs of Adi Purusha, and Shudras were born out of the feet of Adi Purusha. So this was depicted in 10th mandala of Rig Veda. Now you can see in the hierarchy the first three categories like Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas were considered to be in high position, whereas Shudras were considered as lowest. During this time, in the early Vedic period, there were no evidence of Varna. The term Varna was not used, but in the later time, the Varna was used. And they used to call these four as Varnas. First three Varnas had the right over the property, and they used to do rituals, administration, and business. These three were taken care of by these Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, whereas Shudras were considered to be the lowest, and Shudras used to serve the other three Varnas. Now let's move on about fourth Varna. The fourth Varna was Shudra. The local tribal groups like Dasyu, Pani and Dasa form Aryans have defeated these tribal groups and made them as slaves. Shudras were forced to work under the three Varnas. Now move on to the economic system or economic life of Rig Vedic people. The Rig Vedic people were giving primary importance for animal husbandry. Their main wealth was cows, oxen, sheep, horses and camels. They were giving primary importance for cattle. And not only the cattle, and even cultivated land also considered as wealth. They have considered cultivated land as a wealth. And for this cultivated land, the oxen was used in different way. Oxen was used for tilling, plowing, to pull the cords, and as well as to lift water from wells. This oxen were used. Apart from this, the people were engaged in different occupations. The people of this period were not aware of iron, but it was evident that they were using matured processed plants as charcoals to melt metals. To melt metals, they were using matured processed plants as charcoal. Brass and alloy was used during this period, which was called as ayas. The brass, which is an alloy, was used during this period, which was called as ayas. Apart from this, they were weaving, and even carpentry work also was carried out during this period. In the place of SWAT Valley, a village called Aligram, in this place we have found during 11th century there was a irrigated land in this Aligram village. So these people were irrigating the land during 11th century. And they have considered the cultivable land as kshetra. They were calling the cultivable land as kshetra and cultivation as krushi. Krushi is the cultivation. Kshetra means the cultivable land. And the oxen were used to pull cords and plow. And oxen were used to pull water by using pulley. They used to lift water with the use of wooden cups, and the lifted water would have been flown to broader canals. They were using in the was flown to broader canals. That is evident from this picture. You can see here the stone pulley is, the oxen is pulling the rope and the water is lifted from the lake and it is flown in the broader canals. In the other picture, you can see here the oxen is tilling the cultivable land. In the other one, it's pulling the cart. Now, let's move on to the political system of Rigvedic people. The tribes were living in gramas or villages. The tribes were living in gramas or villages. The tribes were called as Jana. The head of these people or head of these tribes was Rajana or Raja, and the position of Raja was hereditary. And Rajan was assisted by Sabha and Samiti. These were the councils which was assisting Rajan. Sabha was limited to noble people and elders, whereas Samiti was a general assembly of the common people. The common people were ruled by Kashatra. Kashatra was the one who was ruling the common people. And soldiers were called as Yodha. The soldiers were called as what? Yodha. Next, we'll move on to the religious system of Rigvedic people. In the religious system, if you see in the religious system of Rigvedic people, Yaga was the epicenter of their religious practices. Yaga was the epicenter of their religious practices. They were doing yaga for two reasons. One, the first reason, to get good rains and harvest. To get the good rains as well as for the harvest, they were doing yagas. And the second reason is to defeat the enemies like Dasyus. To defeat the enemies like Dasyu, they were doing this yaga. The priest who was conducting the yajna or the yaga was called as Hotur. The priest who was conducting the yajna or yaga was called as Hotur. And they were reciting the slokas and consuming soma, a drink, soma rasa. They were drinking soma rasa. And during this period, there was no idol worship. Even there were no animal, human or other symbol. During this period, the fire god Agni and the rain god Indra had given primary importance. They had been given the primary importance. In Rig Veda, about 200 slokas were dedicated to Agni god, that is fire god. Same way for Indra god, that is for rain god, 250 slokas were dedicated. During this time, for Vishnu God, there was no reference in the Rig Veda. In Rig Veda, there was no reference about Vishnu God. But in the latest stage of Veda, the Lord Shiva, in the name of Rudra, had some appearances in Rig Veda. Next, the people of Rig Veda, they were considering the cultivable land as their own wealth. And the god of cultivation was called as Kshetrasya Pati. Kshetrasya Pati was a god of cultivation. Devi Sita was a god of plow. And the minor house deity was Vasatosh Pati. During this time, the people were praying the Lord, and by this time, there were no sign of writing. These people, the Rig Vedic people, were not aware of writing. They don't know the art of writing. The language used here was phonetics. The language used here was phonetics. The language has the resemblance in their characters as well as with the name in Rig Veda as well as along with Indo-Iranian language called Avesta looks similar, and there was a resemblance between Indo-Iranian language Avesta and Rig Vedic language. So children, today we have discussed about Vedic age, 4 Vedas, and how the 4 Vedas, because of the 4 Vedas, how the Vedic age was divided into 2, that is early Vedic age and later Vedic age. And today in Rig Veda period or early Vedic period, how was the social system, how was the society, the economic life of the people, how the political life of the people were there, and the religious system of the Rig Vedic period we have discussed. In today's class, we have discussed about these, and in the next class, we'll be discussing about later Vedic period or post Rig Vedic period. Hope all of you would have understood. I repeat once again for you people, keep watching the video again and again to understand the concept clearly, because here there are new terms which you would have not known before. So listen carefully and pronounce accordingly. Okay, thank you children. We'll meet you soon.